Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Two Wise Guys. We are recording live on Saturday, June 24th, 2017. I'm your host, Dan, broadcasting from Columbia, South Carolina, and across the interwebs, broadcasting from Los Angeles, California, is my co-host, Chris.
Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Great. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, this is a show centered around thoughtful discussion, and we tackle a wide range of topics from science and technology and faith to news, conspiracy, and pop culture. So really no topic is off limits, and the only rules here are keep it civil and have a good time. If you want to join the conversation, feel free to jump in on the live chat, which is located to the right of the video frame. And Chris and I will keep an eye on it and try to make every effort to answer your questions as they relate to the broadcast. If you are enjoying the channel, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have ideas for the show or for show topics, things like that, send a message to us. Go to twowiseguys.org/contact and send us a message there. We'd love to hear from you. From there, you can also check out our previous episodes and search through all of the show notes and find our side projects and stuff like that. And we also will be making some updates and announcements and things to put them up there, so you can keep up to date if you follow this, if you subscribe to that website. And for those of you who don't have the time or the desire to sit down and watch an hour-long broadcast, well, you're in luck. A few weeks back, we launched the Two Wise Guys podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn, and there will be links in the show notes for all of those if you're interested. So be sure to check them out, and again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you feel like you want to be super generous to us, you can always give us a good review to help us move up in the ratings there as well. We've mentioned about iTunes being on hold because of some technical difficulties, and it still is, but mostly because we're two very busy guys and we have a lot on our plates right now. So hopefully we'll be able to get that up and running soon, and we'll make sure to let you know once it's gone active on there. So that's all for the updates, and with them out of the way, let's get into our first segment, The Good, the Bad, and the Strange, where Chris is going to lead us into some of the more interesting news stories from the past couple of weeks. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey guys. Yep, let's get this started with The Good, the Bad, and the Strange. Getting a little feedback on the mic here. All right, so our first article is The Good. This week, I found a lot of good articles. In the past, as some of you viewers might have noticed, I have had trouble finding good articles. So in fact, I found 2 good articles this week, so I'd love to share those with you. The first article here is the headline. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. Let me change the window shape here a little bit so you can see it a little better. I don't know if that makes it any bigger for anyone. But Kurdish designers bring fight with IS to Paris catwalk. And basically, this story is about 2 siblings who were born in I believe it was Kazakhstan. They left Iraq, and they left when they were about 4 years old and 9 years old. So it was quite some time ago. I think it was about 20 years ago. And they started a clothing line 2 years ago in 2015 called Namacheko. So they're actually going to be showing in Paris Fashion Week this year, and they're going to be showing in between a couple of well-known brands, Comme des Garçons and Berluti. For those of you who don't know, I actually work in the fashion industry, so this is something that's kind of right up in my alley. But I just really thought it was really cool because it's people who are from. It's positive news about people who are from an area of the world where there's been a lot of struggle and strife, and the news hasn't always been the greatest. And I just thought this was really cool. We're so used to seeing negativity in our news about things like people from this area of the world. So I thought it's really cool. They're creating a men's line, and they're sort of, they're doing something really constructive with their time. The other good article. Oh, Dan, did you have any comments on that quickly?
No, that's pretty cool though. I like the Kurds. They find innovative ways to stick it to ISIS.
Right? That is cool. So I'm going to share the second good article because I found so many good articles today. CNN deletes, retracts story linking Trump and Russia. This particular story was published by a reporter named Thomas Frank. He's actually a Pulitzer Prize nominated reporter, and I guess he posted an article on Friday that that alleged that there were some potential ties between associates of Donald Trump with Russian investment. Basically, CNN took the story down and actually did a retraction pretty quickly on this, saying that it was not that the journalism wasn't very solid. So this guy was a Pulitzer Prize finalist in 2012 when he was with USA Today. But he reported on the article that he just wrote was actually referencing the Senate Intelligence Committee and saying that they were investigating a, quote, $10 billion Russian investment fund whose chief executive met with a member of President Donald Trump's transition team 4 days before Trump's inauguration. I find it really interesting that they post that this would even be a story. I mean, it's 4 days before the inauguration. I would think that it's pretty standard practice to, before or as you're processing moving into the presidency, that you're going to be starting to ramp up with your diplomatic relations with other countries and such. So, I mean, 4 days before the inauguration is, I believe it's like January 16th. So it's not like this was before the election or anything like that. It's not, so I feel like it's a good thing that this article was taken down, because it seems to be a much ado about nothing that the media is trying to make of these things. What do you make of it, Dan?
I don't know. There's a lot of things that have been said over the last few months that, I don't know, within the media in general, CNN in particular, I've noticed that it seems like it's all about Trump all the time. And there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world. And so I think it's good that they're recognizing that they've been doing that, at least to a minor degree. I saw a survey recently, or not a survey, a study recently, where some people had taken all of the content from CNN from the last, I want to say it was the last like 6 months, and they would do like I think it was in a week, they would have, I'm not going to make up numbers. I can't remember how much it was, but it was something like 1% of their complete broadcasting time was dedicated to actual world news, and almost the rest of it was related to Trump in some way.
Wow, that's really intense.
Yeah, I could have the percentages wrong because it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'll try and find it and link it in the show notes.
It'd be interesting to see what that percentage was with the previous presidential presidents. But still, that seems like it's pretty high. I mean, that's a large number. And yeah, to their credit, they did take this down. I've been on other sites, and I don't want to just pick on CNN here, but there are other sites that I've visited where it does seem like quite a bit, even previously before Trump was elected, there was just quite an inordinate amount of news regarding him. And of course, we understand there's been an election. It's been a big deal, but I would have to say the overwhelming majority of the news that has gone about him is almost always negative, or has quite a bit of negative implications, or a negative spin even on the stories. But moving on, this is the bad. So Johnny Depp slams Donald Trump at Glastonbury, which is a music festival in England, and asks, when was the last time an actor assassinated a president? Basically, yeah. So to be fair, Johnny has since apologized for this, but there's a little video. I'm not going to show the page here because there's some advertisements on there that are kind of not cool to look at for everyone. So I'm just sparing everyone. So this is actually on the Apple News Reader to keep those advertisements out of there. But so he did apologize. There is a video in this that shows exactly what he said. It looked like he was giving some sort of a speech to the extent of it became politically charged, and he just sort of went off and started talking about that, and the crowd, of course, cheered him, making those comments. So it's frustrating. I put this under bad because I feel like, no matter what your political ideology is or where your alignment is with in the political sphere, or if you even care about politics. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do to speak about killing anyone or suggesting that anyone would die in any type of a way. That just seems really lowbrow to me. What's your take, Dan?
I think it's disgusting. I mean, you know me, I've never been a Trump supporter. In fact, I think I fought harder than most people against him during the campaign and during the election cycle. And but you know, he's the president, and we need to at the very least respect the office, and not to mention respect his humanity, that he's a human being, and you know, he's somebody's child and husband and father, just the same as the rest of us. You know, and I don't know. And somehow celebrities think that they are above the rules of decency. You know, like this whole thing with Kathy Griffin first, and I can't remember what her name is. The actress at the women's rally, the women's march over in Washington during the inauguration.
Was it America something or other?
Yeah, Ashley Judd, I think it was.
Oh, Ashley. Oh, yeah. There was a number of them.
There's a bunch of them. But
there's a lot of them saying some really outlandish stuff.
They just need to. I think they just need to realize, like, you guys are not as. They're not as. Their opinions are not as valued as they might seem to think they are, and these outrageous things that they have to say. It shows how shallow and how little respect they have for human life. Like how little respect they have for human life in general, I guess I should say. But I don't know. It bothers me. I saw another article. I think it was yesterday or today, and it was a state congressman from, I want to say, Nebraska. Maybe it was somewhere out west, and out east from you, I guess. And he was a Democratic congressman for the state legislature, and he was praising the shooter at the baseball game in D.C. who shot Steve Scalise. And, you know, it's like, fine, you don't like the Republicans, fine. I'm not a Republican, I could care less. But, you know, he basically said, you know, that he got what he deserved and that he wished he was dead. And there's been a lot of, I think he got fired from his position, and they're holding new elections now to replace him. But, you know, it's just, the environment has just become so toxic, and it's a real shame. And I wish that it would, that we could step back, take a deep breath, and kind of reevaluate where we are.
Yeah. And the shame of it is not just that people are saying, I mean, it's a huge shame that people are saying things like that. Like Johnny Depp said about the president suggesting assassination, whether he suggested it or how long it's been. I feel like a wonderful part of what is going on is that there are people out there who are taking the high road and sort of attempting to bridge gaps and basically make peace with this. And when you make peace with something, it doesn't necessarily mean you agree with everything that people with opposing viewpoints are doing, but you're attempting to sort of bridge a gap and say, look, we can agree to disagree, and let's be civil about this and not make any type of outlandish remarks, especially not any type of thing where people's lives have either been threatened or, even worse, where people have been killed. There's been, I mean, the list goes on and on. Johnny Depp is just the most recent high-profile person to do something like this, to say something like this. Seems like it's just every day almost, or at least every week. So I think we just need to continue to people should continue to take the high road and not give much of an ear to that. And to be fair, a lot of my friends and coworkers, etc. I live in California, for those of you who don't know. So definitely much more of a liberal atmosphere here. And most people that I talk to, while they don't like Donald Trump and his politics, they're not going to go so far as talk about threats on anyone's life and on his life. So I think one of the problems that that we see with the media is just that it's made to seem like it's so prevalent that everyone's talking this way, when in reality that's not the truth. But anyway, I want to move on from this. We're going to move on to the Strange. Oops, forgot to screen share here. This article is pretty interesting. This is a local article, actually, from the OC Register. Man believed dead is alive. Family buries the wrong person after mix-up by OC coroner's office. This one threw me for a loop. I mean, things like this happen where there's like a mistaken identity. But basically, this man was the father. In fact, this man is 82 years old, and he was told that his son had died. So it was a case of mistaken identity where they literally didn't take the proper amount of time, or they weren't careful enough IDing the body, and they came up with this guy's face, and they just assumed that it was him. And they called his father, they called his family, said that your son is dead. And in fact, it went as far as the family buried someone, which I have no idea how you get that far in the process, or how you don't look at the body, or what happened, but they buried somebody else. So someone did get buried at a funeral for their son. However, it was not their son. And there's just so many weird things about this, because you would think that they would know that their son is alive if they're close enough. But maybe they just didn't attempt to reach out to him, probably because they assumed he was dead. So that's pretty interesting. What do you think of that, Dan?
It's a weird story. I guess maybe if it was, I don't want to get morbid about it, but maybe if it was some sort of a violent, like maybe a car accident or something like that, and they couldn't really recognize, based on just looking at them, I could see how that could happen. But I guess the moral of the story is, kids, make sure you call your parents regularly,
Yeah. I mean, the picture you see is here with his son. He's standing here with his son, and in a previous picture, he's actually holding his son's funeral card, if you can believe it. So can you imagine, though, the elation that he felt when he found out that his son really is not dead and he was alive? I think that's fantastic. I mean, obviously, to have gone through believing that your child is dead and then to finding out they're alive is a whirlwind of emotions. But thankfully, he's still there and turned out okay. So we're going to end this segment. That's it for the good, the bad, and the strange. And Dan, take us away with fact or fiction.
All right. And again, for those of you who are new, this is the segment where we kind of go through and have a little fun. We're going to go through 10 headlines. Some of them are fact and some of them are fiction. So it's Chris's job in this week to decipher which ones are which. So here we go. Headline number 1. Devil lamb born with humanoid head sparks panic among villagers.
Nothing really prepares you for these headlines. I
know, right? There's so much fun about them.
I'm going to say fact. It's just too crazy.
Very good, sir. That is a fact. I know it sounds weird, but it is a story out of South Africa. And he, I can't remember the full story behind it, but basically this pig was born. They called it a devil lamb because of the way it looked. It was all deformed and funky, but it was weird. It was a weird looking picture. And all these ones that are actually fact, I will link in the show notes so you can check it out as well later on. All right, number 2, Gmail won't scan email for ads personalization.
Ooh. Boy, that's really tough because Gmail does do that. So I'm going to say fiction.
All right, that one was actually fact. This was a headline from Ars Technica this week that Gmail is going to start honoring people's opt-out requests for ad personalization. So you can already select that in your options if you wanted to for like your Gmail or for your Google searches and your Google Drive, stuff like that. But when it came to Gmail, it was always constantly scanning your emails that were coming in and going out. So now they're going to start honoring that opt-out request as well, which is pretty cool. If any of you are privacy advocates, as I am. So
very interesting.
All right, number 3. Dog survives explosion by hiding in marijuana grow house.
Fact.
Incorrect, sir. That one is fiction.
Wow. This is so hard.
I know. We're getting pretty good at making up our own headlines. We should start our own newspaper or
Once you
something.
practice lying enough, I guess you get good at it.
When you say it like that, wow. All right, number what was this 4? Scientific research piracy site hit with $15 million fine.
Well, true. That's got to be fact.
Very good. That one is fact. It was a it was a site called Sci-Hub, and apparently it would take scientific research and pirate the patents and everything like that and put them out there.
Oh,
And,
wow.
they're feeling the pain this week.
I'll say.
All right, number 5. Trump hotel brand sold to Chinese mogul.
Gosh. It's just crazy enough that it might be true. He is president, so, and I heard that he was getting rid of his stuff. Or no, I'm gonna say fiction on that.
Very good. That one is fiction.
Whew, that was close.
I thought it'd be a good ironic headline there. He sold it to China. Okay.
Sold it to China. Is that your Trump? Is that your Trump accent?
Yeah, it is. It's huge.
That was pretty good. That was huge. What's the score right now? Is it 3-2? Me?
3-2. Bigly. Yep. All right. British Prime Minister vows to block internet access in the name of national security.
Block internet access. I mean, that's like a variation on what I felt she said, but I don't think she said she would block it. Was it that serious? I know Theresa May said that there should be steps taken. That's pretty extreme. I'm going to say fiction.
Very good.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just kind of what I see happening. So hopefully it stays fiction forever.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it does, but it does seem have a nugget of truth in there.
All right. Number 7. Power company, quote, ready to embrace Tesla designs.
I feel like they have been embracing them. They just don't. They just charge money for it. I'm going to say fiction.
That is correct. You're on a roll, man.
All right. I guaranteed at least 500.
All right. Professor says North Korean prisoner, and quote, got what he deserved.
Oh, man. This is really sad, but I would say fact.
Yeah, unfortunately, you just clinched your win there. This was a story I saw on the Daily Mail from University of Delaware professor slammed for saying North Korean prisoner Otto Warmbier was a privileged, rich, clueless white male who got exactly what he deserved. So hopefully that professor gets fired.
Yikes. And the crazy thing is that professor probably subscribes to communism as well.
I wouldn't be surprised.
How else could you say that somebody got what they deserved from a evil dictatorship communist country with a crazed lunatic as their leader?
I don't know. But again, these notes will all be in the show notes if you want to read more about that. And you can check that out for yourself. All right. Number 9. Miracle dog honored for bringing owner out of coma.
How could you bring it? I guess if you have the dog like whisper in their ear. I mean, I suppose it could be fact. Fact?
There you go. Very good.
All right.
Yeah.
How many did I get?
So far, you're at 7.
7?
Yeah.
Wow.
You're setting the record right now. Yeah, I figured after that last story, maybe bring in a high note there.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. And last one, number 10. Bikers escort bullied 10-year-old boy to school.
Fiction.
That one is fact. So at least I got 3 out of the deal.
All right.
Yeah.
Not bad though. 7 right. I think that's the best I've done so far.
I think so.
Cool beans.
All right. So I'm trying to figure out how to get screen share off, and apparently I can't figure that out. There we go. So that's all for Fact or Fiction. Good job, Chris. The final score is 7-3. So you set the new record for us there, and we're going to go ahead and move into our main discussion segment here. So Chris, take it away.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really excited about what we have in store for you guys today. It's a subject that's really sort of something that I've been researching more lately, and I just want to, on the outset, just state that, I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm not a scientist, and I am not, I don't have, and anything that I say here is not to be taken as, just this is a fact. I think research is really important, to do our own research, as well as to listen to what other people are saying on the subjects, and sort of weigh the conclusions in our own balance, and to come to our own conclusions based on the information. So with that out of the way, the subject today is actually the flood that is described in the book of Genesis, where Noah is held to have built an ark of wood, and to have put 2 of every living creature from the earth into that ark. And basically, the Bible says that it rained, and I believe the floodgates of the earth were opened. So that suggests more than just rain coming down from clouds. When you read the scripture in that way, with the translation that says that the depths of the earth were opened. So that's kind of an interesting passage right there in the scriptures that describes how some of the water, if not most of the water, probably flooded the earth. So there is a theory that is not very well known, that is called hydroplate theory. Now, I've put the links in the bio, or the links in the description below the video, so you guys can watch, you guys, as we're watching the live feed, can sort of click on those links to follow along, and to see where some of the information that I've been researching is coming from. The main source of the information is a man named Dr. Walter Brown. He's a scientist, and he's worked in the Department of Defense for the United States for quite some time. So he's not just this guy, some dude who just decided he's gonna come up with a theory on how the flood in the Bible actually happened. And he's written a book, which you can find on his website. It's quite a lengthy and in-depth book. I have not read it. To be completely clear, I have not read his book. I have just done some general research on this. But if you are interested in checking that book out, there's a link to his website in our description, and you can go to that website, and I believe there's a way to purchase his book, as well as getting it on Amazon. And in addition to that, there's also a really fantastic YouTube video. I can't remember the name of the gentleman whose channel it's on, but it's a video that sort of does about, I think it's like about an hour or 2 long. And this guy really goes over in depth a lot of the information that's in that book as well. So I watched the video in its entirety, and of course, I thought it was really amazing. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in the subject, or anyone who's just needs to kill some time, watch it. And it's some really interesting stuff, very compelling evidence, if I might add. I don't necessarily agree with everything in the video. I don't necessarily agree with everything that Dr. Walter Brown puts forth, all of his as part of his theories, but a large chunk of it is very compelling, and I believe should be weighed against the current information that we have with equal weight, because that should only be fair if there's new information brought to light. So really, there's been some predominant theories about the flood on both sides of the spectrum. You have people who've been termed creationists, basically referring to anybody who believes in God and believes that the earth is, they call it young earth theory, that anyone that would believe that the earth is right around about 6,000 years old, give or take a little bit. Anyone that believes that is lumped into this creationist sort of descriptor. Anyone who believes, Jesus came and saved the world from sin is lumped into this as well. So I feel that while creationism is sort of like, it's not really a belief system, there is plenty of science to sort of back the some of the theories about the Earth being much younger than what the supposed fossil record suggests. And that's what we're going to really touch on today. We're going to talk about how the Earth could quite possibly be that young and not hundreds of millions, if not billions of years old, as the fossil record and evolutionists have suggested. And one of the first parts I wanted to touch on is the way that dating is, the way that we date artifacts, such as ancient artifacts that are from ancient cultures, as well as petrified dinosaur bones that are found in the different strata or rock layers that get dug up. So these dinosaur bones have actually gone through a process known as petrification, and they've actually become essentially made out of stone because of the correct environmental stipulations were met. But I just want to share this article about carbon dating with you guys, and it basically it sort of puts in doubt the accuracy of carbon dating. This article is from the New York Times. It was actually written, if you can believe it, back in 1990. So it's not a new article. There also is more current information that puts into question the validity of carbon dating, which I'm not necessarily going to touch on all of that, but this is just the article I felt that was the best to share. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share that with you guys now. Here we go. So it's a little, the text is a little small. Let me just go into I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so if anybody can see some of the words here on the screen. But I'm going to just highlight this right here. It says errors are feared in carbon dating. Again, this is the New York Times. You can see the date here, May 31st, 1990. Just quickly, I highlighted a few key points that I wanted to share from this article. Firstly, new research shows that, however, that in some estimates based on carbon dating may have erred by thousands of years. Now, I'm going to stop right there. That statement in itself is pretty interesting because I feel like a lot of science would have us believe that these methods that they use are infallible and very accurate until new information is revealed. And case in point, I don't have the article to share here, but there was a study done where multiple samples were taken from a specimen of a woolly mammoth that was frozen, supposedly during the Ice Age, and they took different samples from different parts of the beast, and they came up with different ages based on carbon dating. They came up with different ages of the specimen. So I'm not quoting here, but I believe one specimen said it was 9,000 years old and was taken from one part of the beast, and then there was another specimen that was taken from another section of the beast that said it was 20,000 years old. And then furthermore, there was a log that had apparently fallen over and been frozen as well with this beast that was dated to a different date also than the other two specimens. So things like that, and there's many cases where this is where we see this. We just don't hear it very often talked about. There's many cases where there's discrepancies in the dating system. And I'm just going to go back to the screen share on this article. Dan, I'm going to get your take on this in a minute before I move on to the next point. But here's another quote. I've just sort of highlighted this stuff. But scientists have long recognized that carbon dating is subject to error because of a variety of factors, including contamination by outside sources of carbon. And the second quote here is, actually regarding tree ring records. This one really threw me for a loop. Accurate tree ring records of age are available for a period extending 9,000 years into the past, but the tree ring record goes no further. So scientists have sought other indicators of age against which carbon dates can be compared. So that is pretty interesting, Dan, that the tree ring record, which I would think is pretty accurate, you know, down to a certain degree, only goes back 9,000 years. So what do you think about the information that I sort of just laid out?
I think it's interesting. I'm somewhat familiar with a lot of this stuff, but I've only ever kind of just heard about it in passing. Oh, that's really interesting. I've heard the thing about carbon dating being somewhat inaccurate. Going back to high school, I remember hearing professors come in and talk about it, and of course I questioned that. I asked questions from that talk in my biology class and got kicked out of the class because apparently I was disrupting the class by asking inquisitive questions in a science course. Go figure.
Isn't that what science is all about?
It's about using science to prove your ideas, right?
Right, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So it's like in a courtroom, you have facts and you have to prove your case.
Yeah, if any of you haven't seen it, go back and watch last week's episode. That was kind of an inside joke from what we talked about last week. But no, I think it's interesting. And again, this kind of goes back to what I guess it does go back to what we talked about last week, that we're really failing with the scientific method. The whole idea of the scientific method is to form hypotheses and test theories through a scientific method that allows us to find out if our hypothesis and our theories are falsifiable or verifiable. And the whole point of it is not to prove that the Earth is billions of years old. It's not to prove that it's 9,000 years old. It's supposed to be to prove something one way or another. It's supposed to say, okay, is the Earth possibly 9,000 years old? Okay, let's test that theory. Is it accurate? Is it false? Okay. Is the world 65 million years old or 10 billion years old or whatever? Okay, let's see if we can test that. Which really, there's a lot of variables that you just can't really. We don't have the physical means to make those variables, or to use them in a like kind of lab study kind of environment. We have to replace those things that we don't have with what we currently understand it. But if the things that we're using to fill in those gaps and those voids are based on incorrect information, then we end up using false information in order to support the things. I think, does that make sense? I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yes, it does make sense. And I couldn't agree with you more on the topic of mainstream science sort of just wanting to prove what they already believe. But it's nothing new. I mean, we look back in history at times where, for example, Galileo, comes up with his theories regarding the solar system and everything, our solar system being sun-centric instead of Earth-centric. And there he's basically like labeled a kook and told
he's a heretic.
He's a heretic, right? So it all depends on just who's in control of the narrative and what they want that narrative to be. And in the current climate, in the current situation at this time, it seems that the narrative is that the mainstream really wants the narrative to be that the Earth is a certain age, and they're attempting to prove it through different ways. And they can, and it's funny because when facts are brought that sort of contradict that, they sort of just put their head in the sand, and then they pop their heads back out of the sand when they feel like they've come up with like an explanation. For example, there's multiple ways to date specimens other than carbon dating. There's another one called uranium thorium. There's other compounds that supposedly we know the half-life of all these, and that's how you can date things accurately. But the really interesting thing about all that is that between all these different methods of dating, there's massive discrepancies in the aging of specimens. So it's really interesting to think, how can you say, if you're getting different results with different tests, that the results you're coming out with are accurate. How can you possibly say something like that? How can you validate your claims if you can't even make consistent proof of it?
Yeah, and I think I think that really touches on the heart of the issue. Is that um, I know that this, talking about this little discussion we're having isn't going to change the minds of most people out there. Yeah, I don't even know if the goal of this is to actually change people's
Yeah, it's not,
minds. I think it's just
we're
to
not trying to
talk
change
about it.
anyone's mind. Just lay the facts out there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the thing is that there's I don't know how to say it. So, for instance, when I was in high school, I was not a Christian. Hey, I'm a Christian, by the way. Surprise, everyone. But I was not a Christian when I was in high school, and so that's when I got kicked out of that class. Was because I was asking questions about the teacher was talking about the Big Bang Theory, and it just doesn't logically, it just doesn't make sense. And so I was asking all sorts of questions about it, and apparently he thought I was some religious kid who was trying to, make a scene. Um, and really, I was legitimately just wanting to know, like, okay, you say these things, but it doesn't make sense. Like, you know, the compounds that created the explosion to begin with, where do those compounds come from? If everything's supposed to have an origin, then where did it come from? Um, you got to start at the foundation of it and then move forward. But um, I don't think there's anything wrong with differing theories and having different theories. It's when you take a theory that is clearly falsifiable, that we cannot, without a shadow of a doubt, prove to be accurate and true, and we present that as gospel, as it would be, and to say that this is how the Earth was formed. This is how the dinosaurs went extinct. This is how all these different things happened. To be totally honest, it's entirely possible that um, that we put the T-Rex back together wrong. We got the skeleton pieces. Like, we don't know what a T-Rex looked like back then. I mean, it seems really strange that it would have a giant body and tiny little arms.
Sure.
I don't. At least I've never seen any other creature in the world that has a body structure like that.
Well, and the interesting thing is people, some people may not be aware, but if you've ever watched or seen a documentary on these digs where they're pulling out dinosaur bones, it is a mess. There's bones all over the place, and there's bones from different creatures. It's crazy. So I think with that idea, how do we know exactly what these creatures look like? That's another point. And for us to say yes, definitively, this is what they look like is, when and I encourage anyone watching this, go watch a documentary on dinosaur bones and how they're extracted from these different layers of strata. It's a mess when they're pulling it out there, and you're digging with like shovels. This is not an exact science. I mean, some of these archaeologists, they're very talented and very gifted at what they're doing at not destroying stuff, but because you're digging things up, it's inevitable that you're gonna destroy or harm some things and just put things together the wrong way. It's like a puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I think the big idea, so far, at least to this point, I'm not sure if we're going to take a different direction. But for anyone watching, I think the big idea here is ask questions, be inquisitive, and don't necessarily take the narrative that you've been given as the only story. And that if you can do that, that translates to so many other aspects that even of your everyday life. It's not some theoretical or philosophical kind of idea like what we're talking about here. The idea that did Trump collude with Russia? Did different stuff like that? Well, let's talk about it. Let's ask questions. The same method applies to things that actually do matter in our everyday life today. But back to you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that is the whole point of what we're doing. That's the whole point of our channel, is to question things, to teach you guys, to teach our viewers, to teach ourselves, and encourage ourselves and you to continue to question things. Don't ever give up questioning things. Don't ever give up thinking critically about everything. I feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't do that, because I mean, what's the point of our life if we're just going to go through our life just believing everything and that we're told, and sort of and possibly even being swayed whichever the way the wind blows. And there's it's it's we don't want to be swayed, to and fro and tossed around by the waves of the ocean of popular ideas. We want to be solid and put together thoughts and ideas for ourselves and really come to our own conclusions. So I think that's really the point. So yeah. But continuing on with the dating, and let's move on with actually the dinosaur bones aspect of it. I was going to get into more of this theory called hydroplate theory, but we're kind of going in this direction, and I may sort of circle back around to that if we have time. But since we're talking about the dino bones, I'm going to bring this next part up, and this was a shock to sort of the scientific community as a whole when this particular discovery was made, and I feel like a lot of people still don't know about it. It's going on like about, I think, 10 years since this discovery was really made and made public. And the article I'm going to share with you is from the Smithsonian Institution, just about as quote credible as you can get in this type of a field. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share that with you now. But here's a shot right here, front and center. The title of this article is called Dinosaur Shocker, and the tagline is probing a 68 million year old T-Rex. Mary Schweitzer stumbled upon astonishing signs of life that may radically change our view of the ancient beasts. So this is straight from the Smithsonian. We have here's images, basically, I think, in a petri dish under a microscope, and this is actually skin or this is actually tissue taken from a bone, taken from a skeleton that was dug up from the earth that supposedly is a 68 million year old animal buried under who knows how much rock for how long. And this tissue is here, and it still has its elasticity. It still has its base structure. It has this is a separate discovery here, but here I'm just showing you one of the cells right here, and these cells are intact. I mean, can you imagine? These cells are microscopic. For example, when an animal dies, out in the forest or something like that, or it doesn't take very long for that animal to completely decompose and basically go down to skin and bones. I'm not a scientist. I don't know the exact amount of time for every animal. I believe it's different because of different factors in the environment. But this is pretty interesting to say that a 68 million year old corpse still has tissue that has not fully decomposed and is still elastic. So this article is actually from 2006, and there's been more since that time. It doesn't really get very much attention, but the interesting thing is that the scientific community was initially shocked by this. Of course, who wouldn't be? I'm shocked, and sort of it was met with skepticism, which of course, who wouldn't meet something like this with skepticism, especially if you've been subscribing to the theory of evolution and the length of time that these creatures have been dead. So, yeah, it just boggles the mind to think that this information is out there, and yet these scientists and these groups of people are still trying to sort of like figure out a way to make it so that this animal could still be 68 million years old, that the carbon dating is correct, that in fact this tissue that's still alive, that's still stretchy, when the bones turn to stone, is that age. And before I turn it over to you for your opinion on this, I just want to share one of the theories that supposedly debunks the youth of these skeletons. Says that the iron in the blood somehow coagulated and was able to preserve the tissue and the stretchiness of it for millions of years, which I can't even begin to understand how iron would do something like that. First of all, blood doesn't have that much iron in it anyways. So just really interesting that, sort of like you're going to throw the kitchen sink at this stuff and just try to continue to prove your point when there's new information available that sort of seems to suggest that the existing theories of these animals, these creatures being extremely old, might not be completely accurate. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think that it definitely is worth asking some questions. While you were talking, I kind of did a little Google search here to try and figure out, what the decomposition rate would be. And according to this site that just popped up here, the first result on here is it takes about, for an adult human being buried without a coffin, so relatively the same circumstances, but obviously smaller size, it takes between 8 to 12 years for the skeleton to decompose. Um, so obviously adjust that for size and mass of what it would be for a dinosaur. But I think that there's a lot of it leaves a lot of questions to be answered. And again, this kind of goes back um, to the idea that we can have differing theories, but I don't know. It doesn't. Like I said, it doesn't make sense that that should be able to happen for an animal that died 65 million years ago, under any circumstances, whether it's buried in the ground, buried under the water, whatever the case may be. Um, I could kind of understand that from like a frozen mammoth or something like that found up in the Arctic, but this obviously wasn't found up in the Arctic frozen. It was found in the ground.
Yeah, and in those circumstances, there's moisture, there's all kind of stuff in the ground and in the atmosphere, especially supposedly the time when these animals lived was extremely wet, was extremely humid. I mean, this is a recipe for decomposition, at a rate that would be just incredible. So that is, and it's just interesting to hear people try to defend that, continue to defend that these animals are that old, that age, and then debunk this information. Like the person, this Mary Schweitzer, who made this discovery by accident, she's not a Christian, she's not a creationist, she's just a scientist who is digging up bones, and one of the bones broke open and she put it under a microscope and found this. And yet the mainstream feels that they need to debunk this or find like a solution that fits into their box of stuff, like so, and it just sort of boggles my mind. That's the word I keep coming to. It just boggles my mind that that they would try to do that. But I want to talk a little bit about the age of these creatures now, given the fact that of what we know and what the information you just shared, Dan, about an adult human takes 8 to 12 years to decompose in the ground without a coffin. So that would seem that these creatures, so they're buried in rock layers, they're buried in strata. It would seem that these creatures must have been buried under different circumstances, like buried very quickly, for example, and quickly enough to where their skeletons fossilized, right? So, and I don't know all of the science behind fossilization, but I do know that fossilization only occurs in very specific conditions, and only when those conditions are met. And it would appear that obviously these skeletons being buried met those conditions. But I want to talk about the circumstances under which they were buried. These animals were buried. So if we go with the sort of young creation, the young Earth theory that holds that the Earth is about plus or minus 6,000 years, give or take, however many hundreds of years or thousands of years. Could be a little older, could be a little less. We're not trying to put a solid number on that, but ballpark. The Earth could be maybe 10,000 years old. Who knows? But the point that I want to make is that this sort of like ties into the flood theory, because what happens when a great volume of water passes over an area? It carries sediment with it. If you go to the bottom of a river that's flowing, there's just tons of sediment getting stirred up, and the river is always depositing new sediment, and sediment is just small rocks and sand that gets carried in the current and gets deposited. And that's why rivers tend to change shape, or they call it meander, which makes like a little S pattern eventually, because they're actually carrying sediment and depositing it and changing the way the the path of the river, and that happens actually relatively quickly. So anyway, a river is not even that large. It is a large volume of water, but if you can imagine on a global scale an extremely large amount of water, that's going to carry a lot of sediment with it. And if there's any creatures on the ground, when such an event did occur, they would be buried under that sediment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a very large, and so I'm going to continue on with that from the aspect that the flood actually happened. When the flood actually happened, that the continents were still together. Now this hydroplate theory, again, I'm not an expert on it. I am not even the person. I'm not the person who created it, and I have lots more research to do on it. But this hydroplate theory holds that under the oceans, there's these ridges. They call them there's one called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and then there's one in the Pacific. And it's interesting because if you look at sort of like a topographical map of the Earth, you see this basically this mountain range. It's a continuous mountain range, and it wraps around the Earth underwater, and it looks almost like the seams of a baseball. And it's pretty interesting. So this ridge comes up, and they're pretty high underwater mountains. Now the hydroplate theory holds that. And next to this ridge, there's a massive trench. So there's the mountains come up, and then it's just a massive drop off into a trench, and that's where we hear about the really deep parts of the ocean, such as the Mariana Trench, which I believe is some 30,000 feet plus under the water. So it's like 6 miles down there, and this is actually a trench, and that runs right next to these mountain ranges, these underwater ridges. And the hydroplate theory holds that these ridges were actually created when the crust of the Earth was buckled, and that there's large amounts of water that came up from under the Earth and shot into the air. And obviously that water would have gone up in a plume, like with a garden hose, and come back down as rain. Now, interestingly enough, we have we've dug down into the Earth. I think the deepest we've dug down into the Earth is about 7 miles. And do you know what they found down there when they dug? There's actually a hole in Russia.
Oh, didn't they find like salt water or something like that?
Yeah. Believe it or not, there is salt water down there, and it's crazy. They dug down 7 miles, and that's pretty darn deep. I guess that's the deepest hole that's ever been dug, and they found salt water down there, which is really interesting to think, because supposedly our Earth is built on these plates, and right underneath those plates, however deep they are, is hot magma. To quote Dr. Evil, liquid hot magma. So and as the current theory holds, these plates are floating on the magma, and they shift periodically, and they have different types of movements, and that's what causes earthquakes. That's what causes volcanoes to erupt. There's different amounts of pressure that has to be released, and obviously there's quite a bit of truth to that. But the interesting thing is that yes, they have found salt water down there, and so what the hydroplate theory holds is that this water that's down there came up and split the Earth and along that Mid-Atlantic Ridge, that Pacific Ridge. It's like I said, like a baseball all around the Earth, and that's where the floodwaters came from. Again, the scriptures do say God opened up the deep, and that the water came from the deep. It doesn't necessarily say that it just rained. It does say it did rain, but it didn't just rain. The deep was opened up. God opened up the deep. So that is in the Bible. And again, at this point, this is where they say that these ridges blew apart, and that's how the continents. That's how they separated from each other. What do you think about what sort of what I've laid out there so far?
I think it's an interesting theory. I honestly I never even heard of it until like 2 days ago when you told me to look it up. It's interesting. It's an interesting theory. I'll be honest, it's kind of hard for me to look past, all the things that we were in, kind of taught to believe when we were growing up. But in some ways it makes more sense. But I don't know. I'm not exactly sure where I stand on it yet, or what I really think about it yet. But I think it's interesting, and I think it's one of those ideas that that should be. For instance, like I've been in favor of for education, including like I'm like, yeah, you're going to teach evolution in school, also teach other theories too, because it's just a theory, and I think this would be a viable theory to throw out there as well, is that this is something that could have very well happened. Obviously, none of us were there that long ago, so we don't really know for certain. And you mentioned the young Earth theory. Just for those of you who are not aware, the young Earth creation theory is it's kind of a Christian idea of how old the Earth is, and the way that the dating of that usually goes back about 6,000 years, and the way that was developed was through Bible scholars would go through and they would look at you go through Genesis and you look at the generations leading up to the flood, and then they added up the number of years and figured out it was about 6,000 years of human existence before the flood happened. But I just wanted to clarify that. But go ahead, Chris. I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's an interesting idea. Honestly, I'd really like to dig more into it and get a better understanding of it.
Yeah, and like I said, at the outset, I don't necessarily agree with or have formulated, strong opinions on this particular theory, but what I have seen does seem to really add up to what what I just when you look at the way things are in the Earth, the way stuff is structured, it does make sense in a lot of ways. And again, this theory that this gentleman, Dr. Brown, has put forth is pretty in depth. Now, what I just shared, we have a limited amount of time here. Maybe we can touch more in depth on the topic at another episode. But again, I provided the links in the subject below the video. And that way you guys can go and sort of see what you think for yourself, because this is pretty heavy stuff. There's a lot. You can tell there's a lot of research and scholarship that went into this, and I'm not really even doing it justice by describing it this way, because when you look at it and you see all of the sort of information, the facts laid out there of what this gentleman found is it's pretty mind blowing. And again, we're not trying to prove that that the young Earth is even necessarily true, but what I think, again, that brings back to the point of our channel, which is to question things, to look at alternatives, to weigh the information that's out there and see if there's anything that might give a better explanation. And in a lot of ways, in some ways at least, I believe that this theory does, from what I've understood of it so far. So I really want to encourage our viewers to just take a look at that stuff. It's some really interesting stuff. And in fact, let me make another suggestion. There was a documentary that was released on Netflix. For those of you who subscribe to Netflix, it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $7 or $8 a month for the basic plan. But there was a documentary on Netflix that was released earlier this year, and it talks about, I believe the title of it is Genesis History. And that actually, I do have a link for that as well in the description, so you guys can sort of see what that's all about. I linked it to the IMDb page. And it's a really, really, really interesting video or documentary to watch, because they talk about a lot of different things, ranging from the fossil record to just modern anthropology. Really, they don't really touch on the hydroplate theory, so it's just another viewpoint on this subject. And it's really cool to sort of take a look at these things and take the information that you glean and sort of weigh it against what you already know, and just put the facts together for yourself. It's a really fun thing to do.
And I think it's pretty cool too. From what I understand of it, it doesn't necessarily even throw out all of the the tectonic theory stuff either. Like, sorry, I was running a little bit today. There's for instance, there's the idea of Pangea, the supercontinent idea. I believe that's part of it. A big part of the Pangea idea is that the continents were all at one point were together, and the model that I saw of this showed that as well, that it was just one big continent and it broke apart, essentially forming the Americas and then Africa and Europe and stuff like on that side, and then it splits apart from there. So it's a cool theory. It's a cool thing to look into. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Chris, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, just one more just one more little thing to add on, and it's regarding the bottom layer, or sort of like the top layer of stone, which in a lot of areas is granite. I just want to, get you guys to just continue to watch, or if you can, just go watch that video or those videos, because granite has some really interesting properties as well. And it's one of those things that's where it's one of those stones that's very hard and very dense. So there's some interesting properties about granite that really fit into this hydroplate theory as well. Again, just want to close with, I'm not saying that this is the correct theory. It's just the latest sort of like research that I've done that's really piqued my interest, and I want to share it with you guys, and to see what you think about it. We really want to encourage you guys to, make comments off to the left, on our live chat, leave comments below our video. Please subscribe, please, turn on notifications for when we post up videos. And also, in addition to contacting us via our website, which Dan mentioned at the beginning of our show, go ahead and just leave a comment if that's the most convenient thing to do. Leave a comment below this video. We read all the comments. We'd love to respond to you guys, and we'd love to do shows in the future that are based on content that you guys want to hear about. So please, we want to hear from you guys. And thank you again for listening to us ramble about this. This is just something that I'm really into. So we want to thank you for that. Dan, take it away.
All right. Well, yeah, Chris touched on most of this already, but again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. We do this every other Saturday night. So, we're doing it tonight. The next one will be July 8th. If you want to check in on that one, it's always 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So, you can figure that out. If you can't figure that out, just do a Google search and it'll tell you what the time is in your particular time zone. But yeah, so we have a lot of fun with these things. We talk about all sorts of different topics, and go back and check out our previous episodes as well, if see what kind of stuff we've been talking about. And I'm sorry about the sound there. So again, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and reach out to us at twowiseguys.com/contact. There's a contact form on there. You can just write your message in and send it to us. We'd love to hear from you. And again, like we enjoy having interaction. Nobody hopped in the chat room tonight, but that's all right. So if you ever have anything you want to say, or if you want to engage, that's a good place to go during the show itself. If you're checking this out after the stream has been archived and it's just on YouTube and on our website, then just go ahead and send us a message there, or you can comment on the page itself. And also, if you enjoyed the discussion we had today, I thought it was a really interesting one. Again, it's not really one that I have a whole lot of background and information on. But if you like it and you want more information on stuff like that and other topics similar to it, make sure you check out Chris's new blog. It's at itsmr.e@wordpress.com, and there'll be a link in the show notes for that as well. And again, if you want to check out something that's a bit more of the and the byline on my site is Answering the Post-Christian World. So if you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, you want to know a bit more about Christianity, or about what we believe about things, what as it pertains a lot of times to particular things that are happening in the news and in the world today. Check that out at ancientabandon.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Reborn Jumpman. Chris is not on Twitter because he is boycotting social media, I think, or something like that. But
not boycotting, but it's just
no, you're not. Okay, well, yeah. So you can find me on there. I'm fairly active. I'm not as active as like the president apparently, but I'm on there every now and then.
Probably shouldn't be as active as he is.
Yeah, they need to cut him off, seriously. And the one last thing is, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, is that we're setting up a Patreon page. We're not expecting to make this a full-time gig, but it would be nice to be able to pay for like the server and everything like that. So we're setting up a Patreon. If you're enjoying the content and you want to support us in that kind of way, that'd be great. Maybe be able to help us invest in some better equipment so we can stop using the Hangouts on air. Thanks, YouTube. You're doing a great job. But it's not the best broadcasting software out there. And and I've got the know-how to set things up to make things work really well, make it a very professional broadcasting setup. But I don't have the money to do that. So that's kind of things that we have on the horizon, maybe some swag coming later on and different things like that. So we got big ideas, but we got very little pocketbook. So
We po.
we po. But again, thanks again for tuning in tonight. Chris, thanks for a fun discussion. And if you guys want to get a hold of us, again, just head over to the website and send us a message. But until next time, until July the 8th, we will see you all later.
Thanks, guys. Good night.